Bill Wilson, co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, wrote in 1952, "If we examine every disturbance we have, great or small, we will find at the root some unhealthy dependence and its consequent demand." Wilson suggested that if we could identify and continually surrender these unrealistic and unrealizable demands, that we may then be able to accomplish what he imagined to be the recovery's next frontier, something he called emotional sobriety. Flash forward 70 years and join psychotherapists and best-selling authors Tom Rutledge and Dr. Alan Berger, who have taken up the mantle of exploring Bill Wilson's new frontier. Welcome to Emotional Sobriety.
Welcome to Emotional Sobriety, my emotional sobriety, hopefully. Producer Patrick Newman's emotional sobriety.
My attempt at it.
Yeah, and hopefully Alan's. Alan's still out. We're missing him in some of these recordings because he's in the process of moving. And Patrick, you were just saying that you look forward to having him back because you have questions that you want to ask him about how you maintain emotional sobriety through such a stressful time. I don't know of any more stressful time than a big move like they're going through.
Oh yeah, when you've got to grow like an extra 5 arms because you're moving cross country, and you're just going to be spread thin, and that's where what's the expression? The rubber meets the road for emotional sobriety.
And it's like it's anybody can have a good day on a good day is what I always say. It's like it's those days that are not so good that we get to learn and grow, and there's just something about those extra buttons that we have, in our relationships that become exposed or more vulnerable or whatever when we go through stresses like that. I see that a lot with people who are couples who are going through renovations in homes or things like that. It's amazing how just outside stressors will really, really challenge this, but it would be. I think
you guys were a couple weeks ago. You guys were saying it was like marriage and then moving, right? Those are like near the tops of the external stressors that really
moving. And I would put major, either building a house or major renovation of a house in those categories. It's like I've seen those things really, really just pull people apart. And it's like I've got a client right now who's in the process of moving, and she and they've been in their relationship. She and her boyfriend, I think, have been together for maybe 3 years, something like that. So it's an early challenge, but she's been in touch and seems to be doing okay. I thought what we would do today is just something as simple, very simple and practical, and just talk about what inner child work is. When people talk about inner child work, people refer to that a lot in this business and in this work and in this recovery. And what I notice is that a lot of people have different ideas about it. A lot of people have misconceptions about it, for one thing, I think, and I think it's worth at least. So what I would say is it basically along the lines of the recovery program of take what's helpful, leave what's not. I would say I would like to just kind of put out there what I think about inner child work, what it has been briefly about what it's been for me and my recovery, which has been probably the most powerful metaphor that I've ever worked with, and what I think it is, and really what I think it isn't. So that and then at least that can be grist for the mill in terms of conversation. If other people have other experiences, we can get some questions in here and we can start talking about that. But
I know next to nothing about this, so this will be a real
Well, so guide me as we go along. Let me know if where I'm making sense or need to add a little bit of something else in there. So first of all, one of the things that I actually wrote this in my very first self-published book that I wrote back in the 1900s. It's called Simple Truth, and it's basically that the way I put that there was finding the inner child is not really a problem. It's the issue here. We talked about. I talk a lot about changing problem definitions, so we have a workable problem definition. And this is a case where we do that too, because ultimately what we're looking for is the adult to take care of the child. We all know what it feels like to be a kid in an adult world. We often you hear people talk about the imposter syndrome. that sense of I feel like I'm 12 years old and everybody else in the conference room here is, an adult, and everybody else I run into is an adult. But I feel like, always, when I was way into that imposter syndrome, as a young therapist, I was always I think I was just waiting for the other shoe to drop in the form of somebody just to stand up and go, aha, you know, I see this. You're not a therapist. You're little Tommy Rutledge, And it's because it felt like I was just kind of pulling something off, all the time,
Hmm.
and but that feeling, any of those feelings of feeling lost that we feel in recovery, certainly in early recovery, where we stop using our drug of choice or our behavior of choice, you know, that those desperate feelings, those actually come from our what I would refer to as our inner child, and that's a good place to start, because what we're gonna try to do is move to what I think of as a new definition for being an adult. And my definition for being an adult became really right around the time that I wrote that book, and it's kind of stayed the same all the way through. Rather than the stereotypical ideas I've had about being an adult, having a certain kind of job, or even sometimes dressing certain ways, or cutting my hair a certain way, do something to pull off that appearance. The In recovery, the definition became, I am the person who takes care of this inner child. Okay. And the inner child, let me just disclaim this one right away. The inner child is not really, a lot of times people will think, oh, well, that's the playful, funny part of us. It's like, well, I mean, I get that when we could, and metaphors can be changed to mean different things, but ultimately that's not what inner child work is in therapy. It's, people will often say to me, because I'm goofy and funny and stuff like that, they'll say, "Oh, you have such a active inner child." And if I'm, and I'll just let that go if I'm just, it's just in passing. But if we're in this, conversation about therapy, what I want people to know is that's not true at all. It's like any of the goofiest, silliest parts of me don't come from that inner child. For me, I mean, this is all adult. This is all comes from what first of all, how I learned to deal with life as I grew up, and how I learned to take care of myself. But actually, that inner child for me, if I actually characterize my inner child, that's a very quiet part of me. And it's a place. And one of the best ways to describe it is the inner child in therapy represents all of those places developmentally along the path that we did not get needs met, that things happened to us that shouldn't have happened to us, or that things didn't happen that we needed to happen. And so there are missing pieces, or there are pieces that are actually there that shouldn't be there. And the way I think about it, sometimes I'll tell clients, I'll go, and I want you to get overwhelmed, but it's like we're really talking about children within, not child within. It's like all along the way, if we just look at developmental psychology, all the things that didn't happen for us, all the things we didn't get, doesn't mean whether we're aware of it consciously or not. There's a part of that little kid that just kind of, just sets up camp and waits. And a lot of times they're waiting and waiting and waiting. Then what happens is, of course, we get into relationships as an adult, and what happens very often is that that inner child who feels bad, a lot of times shameful, feels inadequate, is actually the one who ends up leading us into our relationships, and trying to get that our partner in the relationship to meet those needs that were never met, which is, pretty standard what you hear in couples therapy a lot of times. And a lot of times what happens with that is that vulnerable inner child is going for the parent part of that partner. And very often early on in the relationship, that's kind of a positive experience. And somebody, especially for people who are rescuers, many of us have that rescue ability. We do that, but that stuff is going to get old pretty fast after a while too. But also what happens as time goes on is that vulnerable inner child in the relationship is making that play for the parent part. This is unconscious. You don't know that you're doing this. It's like they're making a play for that parental, that nurturing parent part of their partner. But then after a while, if that gets old, what happens is they get instead the critical parent. This is all from a thing called transactional analysis. That was a big thing, big psychology back in the 70s. It's a lot of amazing, wonderful stuff. It's but that critical parent uh, basically responds instead, and so what happens is it feels like, oh my God, you're letting me down, you're disappointing me, everybody's done this to me. And this is where we see people have transferred their childhood pain into their relationship. And so this is the setup. I mean, basically for people to do inner child work, because what happens is it turns out if you and I are in a relationship and I'm trying to get you to take care of me, even if I may be unconscious of it or whatever, but I'm not good at taking care of myself. I know I tend to be manipulative to get my needs met because I don't know how to get my needs met directly. Eventually, if at first you may be fine with that and be doing that, and then eventually you get tired of that. What happens, what we have to say, what somebody has to tell me, is that it doesn't matter, Tom, how much Patrick wants to help you, how much he wants to heal you from what's happened to you in the past. The only person who can do this is you. Now what we will say is your friends and your partner, your wife, your husband, your boyfriend, girlfriend, they can help, but they cannot do it for you. It's like we and so this is a place where a lot of times at the beginning of inner child work, people become very disappointed because we have to give up that fantasy of rescue, that there's going to be somebody comes into our relationship that's going to be the thing that is the magical cure for all that ails me, all that has seemingly been so wrong about me. And you're out there in Hollywood. The old Hollywood model. And I'm gonna get somebody who's gonna make me whole,
I would guess
complete
that's
me.
probably never worked once in human history.
I don't think so.
It's
it's
pretty funny.
and well, it works. It works until it doesn't work. Basically, it's like as long as you get two people who buy into that fantasy. But it's like, yeah, I mean, and I, I can love a good romantic comedy movie as much as the next guy. But the truth is, at the wedding scene at the end of those movies, that's just the beginning. It's like, watch the sequel, depending on how good the person's agents were and stuff like that. They're probably out of that relationship and on to another one. But it's like it was at the time, it feels perfect,
Not to not to digress too much, but did you happen to see that movie Boyhood, where they filmed it over
no,
10 years?
no, I have not seen that. I
You heard
heard
about it
somebody
though,
talking
right?
about that. Yeah.
Where they really do kind of chart the relationships coming together and apart and try to do it with the same actors and
Hmm.
anyway, that would be the attempt at what you're talking about. Let's see what
Did
happens
you?
after the wedding.
Yeah.
And
Did you like it? Did you like the movie?
yeah, I mean, it was just it was so
I mean, it's,
beautiful.
it's it's just reading about it. It seemed like such a massive undertaking. It's
Yeah,
like,
you
yeah.
really just have to, I don't know, commit to it. And I think he just found the right people to do this poetic, personal, creative thing with. And yeah,
That's
it was nice.
well, see, that's okay, that's a good, and that's exactly what we're talking about when we talk about moving into this kind of work, which is to say this is about getting realistic. It's like this is about me taking responsibility for that inner child. It's like I'll tell this story. The first time I ever went, the first time I had any introduction to this process at all, I went to a week long program. A friend of mine, now, I just met him that day, but named Bedford Combs still does this work. And it's a week long program with a group of like probably a dozen people to come together in a group. And the first night they were going to do this visualization, and the visualization was you're going to meet your inner child. So I'd never had any experience with this at all whatsoever. So I lay down on the ground and on the floor and close my eyes and start following the inner. And I'm not usually a very vivid. I don't know if you are or not, but I'm not usually somebody who's just like extremely vivid with visualizations and stuff like that. I tend to track things more abstractly and conceptually, stuff like that. But this was a very different experience for me. It's like, and there was this. I remember there was this little path that you're walking down as yourself, and then you look ahead and there's a little kid, in my case a little boy, and you're supposed to walking toward me, and the guided imagery is that I'm supposed to then recognize that it's my inner child. Well, this is where the fun begins, and it was weird to me. It's like it didn't feel fun. In other words,
Mm-hmm.
it's in my visualization, my inner child saw me, recognized me, turned around, and took off running. And I literally chased him for the entire rest of that visualization. Now, of course, of you and I've talked about how we make assumptions about other people to kind of put ourselves down. At the time, I assumed everybody was having a wonderful experience with their inner child. You know, I don't to this day know exactly what it was, but it's like I was trying to catch this kid, and then and never did. And so the first my experience with the inner child was the inner child was clearly not a fan of me. And it's kind of an interesting way to start, because a lot of times people who are facing inner child work, thinking about inner child work, will say they don't want to do that inner child work because they have negative feelings about themselves as a child. They'll say they'll say I hate my inner child, or if they're, you know, and if they really are already working on this stuff and getting really honest, what they're going to find is that they're scared to death of this inner child, because and to be afraid of the inner child makes perfect sense, because the inner child, as I've described the inner child, is not the playful, wonderful, you know, the one you want to take to the park. The inner child represents all of the unexpressed, unprocessed pain of your life that you have not processed yet. So
Right. I mean,
it's
I
like,
was
you know,
thinking the rawest form of myself, right? Is the way I
yes.
would,
Oh,
yeah.
absolutely.
Yep.
You know what I'll tell, especially people who are parents, and I mean those of us who aren't parents can still get this too. But you know, a parent will say to their child, you know, if I could feel this for you, I would feel this pain for you. And what I describe to people on the front end of inner child work is that you imagine that you have that child there, and that they're full of this pain that needs to be processed. And in this case, you can. And so you put your arms around that inner child, and as you embrace that inner child, that child melts into your body, and you actually go through, over a period of time, by the way, not all at once, a process of feeling all of that unresolved hurt. It's like, so of course I'm fucking scared of this, you know, when I don't know much about it, and just unconsciously, you know, I have this information. It's like, so I may not know literally what it is, but I do know that this is something that is about going back into my past and feeling things that I have really worked hard not to experience before. So that's one of the reasons it's like, you know, it's sort of inner child work's not for sissies. It's really hard work to be able to do that. Actually, I'll slip back to the story of that week when I was after I'd done that visualization. The very next day, we were in a dialogue. We're doing some therapeutic dialogue with the inner child, and so I'm doing both parts of that. And what I was surprised to find is that my inner child, one of the things my inner child said to me was, you know, when I was asking why did you run, he said, I know who you are. And it's like it's weird when you have these internal dialogues. You know a whole lot more a lot more information gets conveyed in short sentences. But what that meant was, at that point, I had been sober for I don't know, maybe 2 years tops. Is like I hadn't, probably not that long. It's like, so what I understood in just that one sentence was basically I was the asshole alcoholic who had been abandoning him for years. You know, this initially was not about what was missing with my parents. We get to that part as we move along, but ultimately later, I didn't have that insight at the time, but I did get to the place where I understood later that as Robert Subby says, I quote him quite a lot with this. Robert Subby, in his book Lost in the Shuffle, says, as children we're victims, as adults we're volunteers. And in this way, what I had found was, you know, we all find a way to basically continue to abuse or neglect ourselves in similar ways than we were abused or neglected as children, you know, and in this case, to not respect ourselves. And it's like, and in my case, absolutely not take care of myself emotionally or psychologically at all. So that began to make sense to me at that time. And I began to work toward committing myself to taking care of this inner child. So and I want to go back. I'm realizing I kind of want to go back to finish up this little nutshell workshop. I want to go back to that story just for a minute. But first, what I want to say is that if people are interested, if people listening are interested in doing some inner child work, the way that I often suggest it is very simply to get one or two, not a lot, but you can explore what you need to explore, but a photograph of a younger version of yourself that you connect to, that you identify with, that you say, okay, that's how I think of myself as I think of myself as a kid. It's like, it may be more than one age. It could be, but it's like, don't overthink it, is what I would say. And when I still at my office at my office, I still actually have the very first one I ever did that for myself with. And I ask people, I say, put it in a frame. The old fashioned way, but don't just put it on your phone. Put it on your phone if you want to also, but put it in a frame. And then one of the exercises I give people is just for, say for a few days or maybe up to a week. If I'm seeing somebody weekly in therapy, I'll say do it between now and next time we meet, is just every day set aside a time, like usually in the morning or something like that, where you just, it's a brief meditation where you just sit with that photograph. That's it. You just sit there and you just don't say a thing. You can listen, you can feel whatever thoughts come to your head. And what's going to happen is just all kinds of information is going to start flooding in, and encourage people to journal some after they do that, but to not feel like they have to capture everything, but just allow themselves to, and I think this is one of the things that has always frustrated me when I was the client, but I do respect that it's important, is exercises like this basically slow us down. We want to hurry up and get to it, especially if it's going to be feel like it's going to be hurtful. We'll go, let's pull the Band-Aid off kind of thing. It's like, but the idea is I say do that for a few days at least, and then after that, do the same thing, but then begin to talk to the child a little bit, to say what you want to say to the child. Also, I'll ask people to listen for what the child has to say to them, because the child will also speak in some ways for you to know, and to journal about all of that, just as a beginning. And I'll go back to bring our little nutshell workshop to a close and say, I was sitting there toward the end of the week, this week-long treatment program I was in, and I'd been talking to my inner child quite a bit. And so I'm sitting there with my inner child and these two therapists who are with me. And my friend now, Bedford, the therapist at the time, he asked me where I would put my inner child if I was going to take my inner child into my body. And I said, my hand, just like it is here, wide open, right in the middle of my chest. It's really my heart, but it's really right in the center of my chest. And so I said, right here. So he said, okay, put your little boy there. And then he said, I want you to say this sentence to him. And he said, tell him I am the parent that you've always been waiting for. At which time I said nothing. It's like, nothing. I have no idea how long this lasted, but I couldn't speak. I mean, it's like I even at times tried to say something, and I can feel it right now as I'm even saying it. I was speechless. It was, imagine that for me. It's, and so he repeated it a few times, was very patient. I am the parent that you've always been waiting for, and we processed stuff along the ways, which was also, and we ought to deal with this somewhere along the line too, about inner child work and family of origin work. Is they were very kind. They made it very clear that it doesn't mean everything is wrong with your parents. It doesn't mean that they didn't give you some things. This marker of I am the parent you've been waiting for is I'm here to take care of what's left over. I'm here to help you with what you need. Now, for some people, that's more stuff than others. And so for some people, it's the first time they've ever had a parent that's going to show up at all. For me, that's not the case. I mean, my parent, so I needed that reassurance that I wasn't there being disloyal or dissing my parents for the work, their best efforts to do what they did, but to not that minimized the power of this moment for me. And then finally I said it, I think very softly. I am the parent that I am the parent you've always been waiting for. And then I pretty much, and I couldn't tell you how long, but it felt like I probably was in the fetal position, crying and snot coming out and everything for about 20 minutes. It's like, but it was just a very deep, it's not always that dramatic, but it was for me. And and because, and I think it was because I'd never even heard of this work before I had done and it's like and it's one of the things that convinced me, of course, because of my experience with that how very real it is at a deep level. um, and that's the beginning of this stuff. It's like if you do like to do inner child work, journaling is a beautiful way to do it. Conversations back and forth, writing letters to your child, right, and having your child write letters to you, those kinds of things. But what I want people to know most of all is what I said at the outset, which is it's really just a way of coming together to become an adult. I call it vertical alignment. It's like if you if it's me taking care of the child inside of me. If you add a spiritual component to that, if you add any version of God you want to that, then it's God, me, and then my child. And the way I've always described it is, I don't know why the design would be that way, but apparently, if there's a God, then God decided that it's better. God will deliver the message to me, which is, I'm here for you. I love you. I care for you, you know, and I have to take it the rest of the way.
Yeah, you're the
That,
proxy.
yep, I have to take it into my heart and put it there. And, learn, and he's still, I don't think in that terms of that inner child every single day of my life, but it's like I do know that I have this particular movement where I have my hand on my chest, and it is a totally reassuring experience for me, and it all began with that process. So I mean that's a lot of that's there's a lot of information missing from that if we're not doing a comprehensive job of inner child. But that's what it's about: healing the parts of us that are hurt. And the truth is, for anyone who's listening who's scared of that, understand that it's perfectly good reason to be scared of it, because it's really scary and it's painful, but it's painful for a wonderful purpose. You do come out on the other side. You will emerge from the other side, and you will be more whole because of that. How'd I do? How does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I my closest firsthand experience with this inner child work is in group at Kaiser.
Mm-hmm.
I was asked to sit on the floor and assume the point of view of my inner child, and
Mm-hmm.
and I mean everybody went around and did this, and it seemed like people were going to some pretty deep, sometimes dark places, but
Mm-hmm.
there was always like a strong catharsis, it
Mm-hmm.
seemed,
Yes.
as a result of that.
Yeah, it's such I love doing the work, and my favorite way to do it is to do it in groups. I love the group stuff, because if you've done those groups, that as long as you're paying attention, you're not healing just when you're doing the work. You're healing when anybody's talking,
Yeah,
anybody's
there's
working.
there's a symbiosis, and a kind of like, you're motivated by each other to like really put up with that.
Oh, it's a wonderful. This is a different subject, but it's a wonderful way of addressing that double standard that we so often have for those of us who are mean to ourselves. Is that everybody else deserves good things except for me? It's
Yeah,
like, because one of the things you find yourself doing in those groups is I mean, with all of your heart, you root for your friends. You see
always.
them going through those experiences, and you're going, oh God, this is so beautiful, and you're there to tell them about that afterwards. That's so good. That it's so important to have witnesses like that. So we take dinner break, and and somebody at dinner, you're going like, I mean, it was like telling you, oh, it was amazing to watch you do that, and really get that information back from people. And then the challenge becomes, you're confronted, if not directly, indirectly, with the double standard, and go, okay, well, if all of these other people deserve this good stuff, I'm really not going to get to be the exception to the rule. It's like, It's and what what I've said often about deserving. Deserving is not about I've done something wonderful so that I deserve a prize. Deserving just simply means I deserve it as much as the next guy.
Yeah.
And that's what you get in those groups. You go like it's so much easier to say we deserve this. That's a good way to start with to get to I deserve wonderful good things.
Yeah, I still think about people that I probably only knew, collectively for like the space of an hour or two, but
Yeah,
I still remember those faces. Good people.
absolutely. Oh, it's the coolest thing. You get to know people from the inside out. At the end of one of those weeks, I remember I've done several of those in my life, but I remember that first one. It was amazing. I knew these people so well, but I had no idea what their last names were. I had no idea what they drove. I had no idea what jobs they had. I didn't know anything about them. It's like turned out this one person who role played my inner child several times, and it just felt really close to her. It's like she was some high powered attorney, in some big city. Sort of seemed like the opposite of me or something. It's like, but it was like I didn't know that part. I got to know who she really was down deep inside. It was cool.
I still haven't had the experience of seeing them on a movie poster or the side of a bus. That would be
Oh yeah, there are people who do that.
right.
It's like
Oh, I know you.
I was yeah, that's where confidentiality gets to be difficult for people because they want to say like I want to tell you who my roommate was in treatment.
Right.
It's like I remember when Ringo Starr went to outed himself as going to Sierra Tucson back in those days, and he I don't know if he did it knowingly or not, but I think he did the people that were there a great service by him coming out and saying that he had been to treatment and where he had gone to treatment, because I think that allowed them to be able to say, because I'm sure they were all saying anyway that
oh yeah,
there I was with Ringo.
Yeah, I mean, if you're a Beatle, that like takes it to comic extremes.
Right. It's
like a demigod. Yeah.
That's right. I'm sorry. Anonymity, it's going to have to wait. It was Ringo.
Yeah. Right.
Got it. So,
well, this was great, Tom.
Thank you, Patrick. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
Tend your life. Tend your myth. Cultivate your narrative with whomever you're with. Then with glass in hand and children on one knee, bring some stories, bring your stories back to me. It ain't a crime to be a human. Never be ashamed to be yourself. Rest assured that whatever you're doing will entertain me like nobody else. So here's to us, my old friends, until it's time to drink the wine and break the bread again. With glass in hand and children on one knee, bring some stories, bring your stories back to me.